Welcome as you shuffle in. Thanks for joining us today. Glad to have you here. So we will get started momentarily as we give everybody a minute to get in before we go ahead and start get things going. So hope you are having a great start or finish to your day, depending on where you are or when you are watching this. So I think this is going to be a very good webinar. Um, I think more than most of you are expecting in terms of this isn't just a what do you do when you're starting from scratch, which I will get to for the second half, or maybe even a little bit less in the second half. But the first part will be the more surprising behavioral, very interesting to me because there's been a lot of work on it the last 20 years and some great books you may have read about human behavior and some of our quirks and heuristics, etc. So let's go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone. Let me share my screen with you. I am Phil Ratcliffe, president and founder of Rebel Financial. And I am happy to host you today in our webinar about our subject. It kind of sounds silly. I have no money, but I want to. How to start building wealth from scratch. And so this absolutely is a very important subject because this is most of us in the world, right? We got to start from somewhere. Most of us did not have, a trust fund to come from, or a AI like Iron Man to tell us what to do and to take care of all the details, right? And so we have to figure it out and start. And if we really think about this, you know, or what the reality is, most Americans, can't even cover $1,000 emergency, and that gap, especially, is getting thinner and thinner between what people earn and what they owe, and the cost of living going up, et cetera. But there's good news. Wealth is not just about where you start from; it's about how you behave. And so today is about understanding how to move from where you are right now to where you want to be, step by step. But first, we got to kind of learn about ourselves and how to do that. And so, it's easy to feel like the deck is stacked against you because in a lot of ways it is. Like I had mentioned before, wages haven't kept up with inflation. Cost of housing, healthcare, education has skyrocketed. At the same time, we live in a culture of celebrating instant gratification and constant consumption. We're pushed to spend instead of save. And most people, feel trapped. And the truth is that wealth doesn't come from a single big win. It comes from a series of a lot of small, consistent, almost boring decisions repeated over time. And so I think we're all in love with the movies or the Netflix series, or maybe it's Amazon, of people getting rich quick, or they're lucky, or this is going to happen for me. And the truth is, it very rarely does. And statistically, when you look at how many human beings there are, it almost never does statistically in that way. Yet we're all holding out hope for it. I mean, just look at the Mega Million sales, right? And so not only is your brain programmed a certain way, which we're going to talk about, almost from birth, to fall victim to a lot of these behaviors we're going to talk about, our society and culture, a lot of times even our family and our parents reinforce these bad things that hold us down, and give you a low probability of winning, even in the long term. So, mobility, so you may have heard the politicians' phrase of that, social mobility, it's been shrinking. And it has not been that great traditionally in the world since the beginning of human history, pretty much. And so it got better for a while in the United States, after World War II, and the expansion of the middle class and everything we did for our veterans, and, trying to come together as a country to fight communism in its then current form. But only a small fraction of people move up. And that has become less and less the last 30 years. And I think a lot of people are realizing that. You hear the things is like, the American dream is not attainable anymore. Most people now are pessimistic in the polls that their kids will not have a better future than they did. And that hasn't been that way, since the greatest generation, way back when, that had to live through the depression and what so. But your decisions matter and they compound just like interest when we talk about investments and building up money. So every good financial behavior multiplies over time. And that's what this webinar is really about, is how to start changing those behaviors that will compound so your effort actually builds you something strong, something to be able to change your stars. So let's keep moving on. So, the surprising part is the biggest obstacle isn't all those external things that I noted earlier. Your biggest obstacle between you and wealth isn't the economy, your job, your income, it's your own brain. Okay. Our minds evolved to help us survive short-term threats, not plan for long-term success. So we make emotional, reactive money decisions that feel good in the moment or keep us alive, from a more evolutionary perspective, from being hurt, but they can hurt us in the long run. And so since we're more protected from dying, at least most of us that are lucky and developed countries in what so aren't necessarily have to worry about getting killed in a war by criminals or lawlessness, the long-term things end up mattering more, and our brains just really aren't built for that. But once you understand how your mind tricks you, and it's not trying to hurt you, it's trying to save you, kind of like Gandalf to Frodo, right? You can understand and catch these things and catch yourself, and watch your psychology and guard against it to do well. So let's look at some of these things. These first biases really look at time, okay? And so I'm going to explain them to you little by little. It's not going to be in depth. You can look all of these up individually. There are actually, over 100 different biases and heuristics. I'm going to name some of the important ones per our subject today. And so you can look into them more. But even just, we all kind of realize, at least most of us that have done even any little bit of introspection, what our strengths and weaknesses are. And sometimes you can catch some of these things in yourself to stop them. Like, oh, I should listen to this person I care about instead of just going on talking or waiting for my next person, my next opportunity to talk instead of listening to what they're talking about. And I think most of us have that experience of practicing that. But you can catch these things as well. And if you catch these things, then you can change them. And if you change them, you will be more successful. And so present bias. So present bias in us makes us value today more than tomorrow. And that makes it very hard to save. So, you'll spend $5, on a Starbucks or a coffee that's expensive every morning because whatever justification you have for that. But, as we mentioned here, that's $150 a month on average. That's a lot of money for a lot of people that we just wasted on a coffee, but it's just $5, right? You can do the same thing about lunches or about eating out, about buying name brand, almost equivalent thing versus the Kroger brand or what so. But really, the person that you're hurting, the future that you're hurting is yours. Right. And so future us is a different than present us, even though that sounds weird, but we're really not if we can think about our future selves as a person we care about and want to take care of as well, and to try to overcome that present bias. Loss aversion. This is a huge one. Loss aversion drives human beings hugely because when they've actually done the studies on this, and when people aren't thinking about it, they don't understand necessarily that they're testing for this. It's different for different people, but on average, loss hurts you twice as much as gain makes you feel better. And so over time, as we stack up enough losses, we tend to try to avoid the loss more than to go after the gain, right? And you could probably pick this up sometimes in some of your own behaviors, but to understand that it's true. But sometimes it really does hurt us. People will not change things because they're afraid of loss, or not follow where the odds or the probabilities were in their favor if they did it enough, because they didn't want to lose. But sometimes you have to lose to win. And if we don't understand that and learn to overcome it, it does make it very hard to win sometimes. Now, we don't want to go the opposite extreme to where, I mean, there are a lot of people that are almost risk seeking, and many of them, they may not have been burned very much. And so they just don't understand that own behavior in themselves, or they may just be the very small tail statistical amount of humans that really don't care about that. But most of us, we do, it affects us, and it's not helping us gain wealth. Status quo bias, so everyone does this to a certain extent. I'm sure you could pick out 3 or 4 things that you're sitting on right now that you are falling victim to this. So staying in a bad job, keeping money in a checking account that pays you no interest, when right now a free savings account can pay 3.5 to 4% free to make 3.5% better. Now, if you're only keeping a few dollars in there, then it's not going to matter that much. But if you're keeping a few $1,000s in there, that's a lot of money the bank's just putting in their pocket, because switching is hard, right? And so inertia, or getting moving, is expensive to our brains, especially back in the day when we had limited calories. That's why you have this behavior. And again, it can hurt you or hold you back. So overconfidence and mental shortcuts. So these are confidence traps. So overconfidence bias makes us think that we're better than we are, like assuming that we can time the market or beat the odds. And so you got to kind of open up on this one, because we do think that we're better than other people. When we read what the odds are or something that happened to someone else, we're like, that's not going to happen to me. That's someone else. This can also, there's another one that goes to this that's actually good for humans in terms of staying alive, is generally when something bad happens to you, you attribute it to externalities. So like if you were to lose your job, it's not because you did a bad job. It's not because you did something wrong. It's not because of who you are. It's because the economy was bad, or they were just reorganizing, or the boss didn't like me, or someone lied about me. So again, this is hard to accept, but you a lot of times can't control those externalities, but you can control yourself. So if we accept that most things are our fault, you will be a lot more effective in your life and in everything you do. Now, the reason we have this bias is, if you think about it, if we got depressed all the time by all the bad things that happened and said, oh, I suck, I'm a horrible person, you're a whole lot more likely to like lose your motivation, or worse, commit suicide or something like that. So it is a natural behavior for a creature that wants to stay alive to think good about itself, right? So that overconfidence bias and some of the things I've talked about, you can understand why it exists, but you're actually a lot more successful if you would accept more responsibility for things, or not necessarily think that you're better than everyone else or what, so because it would help you prepare more, or more people would like you and you would have more opportunity. There are a number of different ways how that could help you. Anchoring happens when we cling to the first number we hear, like a house price or salary range. It's just normal because we heard it and now we're stuck to it. It can also be when you invest in something. It's like, oh, I bought Coinbase for this, and then it dives 50%. And you're just like, well, I couldn't sell it for that. I mean, I paid this for it, right? Well, it's like, well, maybe something happened that made the value of that company lower. Would you buy it again? And if you're like, no, would you buy it for $50? You say no. Well, maybe you should sell it for $50. So we'll talk about this too again when we get to sunk cost. But you could anchor at a point. If you walk into a room and somebody just says 10 to you, and then somebody comes up to the front of the room and says, how much would you buy this gold pendant for? And you have no idea. Maybe it's gold plated. You're probably pretty close to that number 10, right? If somebody said 100, then your brain is already there and be like $90. Like, so just somebody saying a number can anchor you to something. And so that is something that's not obvious to a lot of people. That happens a lot, that we get anchored to things. Availability heuristic. So it tricks us into believing that what's most recent or dramatic, not what's statistically true, is the right thing, right? So if you see something in the news about lottery winners that just told you something, recently from a source you trust versus an economic academic study that happened 5 years ago, which might actually be way more accurate, more than likely most people will trust what they heard from someone they trusted rather than the most reliable source. So be careful about that. So again, these rules don't work all the time, but most of the time they're happening to us. And brain power, thinking critically about things, having to go and do research, and us thinking critically about things right now, this is hard for your brain. Now, luckily, most of us, again, live in a good country where we're not starving or anything like that. So we have an abundance of calories. We have the luxury to be able to do these things. If we're thinking about making money and investing it and saving it and becoming more successful that way, we're generally not struggling to survive. Now, maybe some of you are, and kudos to you for being here and learning these things, because they will, if you are persistent, pay off for you sooner or later. So emotional and social traps. So money is emotional and social. And, a lot of people will fall into traps trying to keep up with the Joneses, or herding behavior, thinking if everyone's doing it, it must be right. My favorite example of this, I've probably told so many people this one, is when they first opened McDonald's in Russia, in Moscow, and they had, how we're all used to having, the different lines. I think now they do more of the curly lines, and there's one and then you go. But they used to have the straight lines where you get in the lines at different registers. And over there, they had a big problem because people would all get in the same line. And once that line was long, the register people were like, come get in this other line. And they'd be like, no way. Because communism had taught them, you get in line, and that's where the good stuff was, right? And so if these people were going to get out of that line and lose their spot to go to that line, which nobody wanted to be in, that has the crappy stuff. But it was the same thing, right? We know this from going to McDonald's. But that is a very good example of a herding behavior that obviously was inefficient and wasted a bunch of time for them in that example, and could be applied to a lot of other examples. Social comparison, exactly like what I said, is you see somebody else's success or what they're doing on social media, or they spend a bunch of extra money to build a patio, but you can't really afford it, but you're going to do it. So you're going to keep up with the Joneses and make bad financial decisions in comparison to someone else. Ego and identity bias. It makes it hard for us to admit mistakes because we tie our self-worth sometimes, as you start to succeed, to being good with money. I'm good with money. Or I'm good at math. Most human beings, if you practice enough at something, if you're disciplined at it, can be good at just about anything you want to be. Okay. I think the thing more than for the vast majority of people, that you're naturally talented at something is a misnomer. I mean, you even look at, I was talking to my daughter about, getting cut from the basketball team, and was telling her about Michael Jordan getting cut from the team. And he just practiced so much. And that failure helped him turn into one of the best, basketball players, in the history of all basketball players. That is not necessarily true. You can be who you want. You can do what you want if you will do it enough and make the sacrifices to be disciplined about it. And so I think people are more predisposed, environmentally or genetically, who knows, to like things more than other things. So if you like math and you'll practice math and you go do that, then you're probably going to be good at it. If you don't like it and you won't do those things, you're probably not going to be good at it, even though you absolutely had the same predisposition to be able to be awesome at it as someone else. Okay, mental framing and irrational logic. So mental accounting, I deal with this all the time, being a financial advisor and helping people with their money. And it can also be a good thing if you use it right and you understand it. But it's like treating money differently depending on where it came from. Like if you're spending it versus getting a tax refund, versus if it's inherited, versus some other windfall, right? And so people will even take something that, say, from income and split it into buckets. And then once it's in that bucket, it's totally like, I can't touch that money. It's for this. And some of those things are good. You should not hardly ever touch your retirement money, even if you have an emergency. right? That's for your future self, right? You got to figure out the short-term emergency stuff from other things and have savings and plans and stuff for that stuff. But on the flip side, you might have something that's saved for this patio that we talked about before, but then you have an emergency with your car that's gonna make you miss out on the second other economic. You're like, I can't spend the patio money. It's like, yeah, you could. And then you're gonna work an extra shift or two to pay back the patio money, but you need that now to rather than put it on a 25% credit card or something, right? So mental accounting can hold you back as well too. But if we realize it, it can, if we structure it right, work well as well too. Sunk cost fallacy. I told you we'd come back to this one. It makes us stick with bad decisions because we already put money or pride into them, right? And so, like we had given that example before, like say somebody bought in or buying in right now to Nvidia or Palantir, and it's they bought in at the high, and it's like, well, it doesn't matter. AI is going to the moon, and then it drops down 20%. And it's just like, and then everybody starts talking about, well, maybe they've overinvested in this. Maybe even though AI might be the future, maybe we are just paying too much for it. They're not going to be able to monetize it near as well as they think, even if AI changes the world like the internet did. A ton of people lost a lot of money at the beginning of the internet and all the fiber and broadband that we put down, but it still was the future, and lots of awesome things built off of it, and human information, knowledge, etc. So the same thing could happen with AI. So say it goes down 20%, you start talking about this story, people are like, well, I can't sell until it gets back up to where it was. Well, if you don't think it's worth this now, who cares what you bought it for? Sell it now. That's a sunk cost. You lost that. It's gone. It is gone. We need to make the decision from where we are at this point right now, regardless of what the past baggage is, right? You can see how that's very important. Investing, dealing with your business, heck, maybe even dealing with relationships in your family or your kids, etc. A default bias, keeps us from changing course because we go with whatever the default is. A non-financial example of this is organ donation, right? You can see real easy the countries that have the default as no organ donation and you have to opt in versus countries that are automatically opt in unless you opt out. Like here, you got to opt in, have very low organ donation rates. You go over to Europe where it's automatic opt in, and it could be in the upper 90%. They're not that much different than us. If we had the thing switched around, we would be in the 90% as well too. So default bias is very strong. Happen in 401k accounts and stuff as well, or with your health insurance coverage, or bank accounts that charge you a $20 monthly fee because that's just the default versus taking this, the super saver one that doesn't have this extra, benefit that you don't even need that might have been free. Okay. False control, misjudged odds. And so again, before I hit into this, if you guys want to ask some questions, feel free to ask some questions. I do like to hit some as we go if there's a good pressing one. Otherwise, I will try to answer them at the end. So do let me know if you have any questions, and I'll try to hit them for you. Okay, so put them in the chat, and we'll try to hit them. Aaron, if I don't see it, tell me about it, and I'll try to answer. Okay, so false control, misjudged odds. We love the illusion of control. Human beings in general do. We think if we plan hard enough, we can control randomness. That's the illusion of control. Most of the universe is random. It's probability and statistics. I know that sounds no fun, not like the clock work universe that a lot of history of human beings used to like. But there is a lot of randomness. And when things happen the way that we want them to, or in a way that seems to align with something that we believe or want to believe, or that's a good story, because human beings love stories. That's what we did, around campfires for probably tens or hundreds of thousands of years. Then we think that it's something that we can explain. We like putting orders to things, recognizing patterns. Our brains are constantly looking for this. And so we have this illusion that we can control things, or it's explainable by. Now, we have made great scientific progress in explaining a lot of things, but that by no means puts us necessarily in control of some of them, most of them. Neglect of probability. We underestimate unlikely, but devastating risks, like job losses or medical emergencies, and we overstate, some of the ones that, again, that are unlikely but good events to us, like winning the lottery or becoming rich. You see this all the time with voting. So many people vote against their futures and their own kids' futures because they think they'll be rich in the future when it is very highly unlikely. I mean, I really hope you do. Absolutely do. But the probabilities are very much against you. You should probably want to tax the wealthier, have universal health care, have more job protections, have higher wages. But a lot of people will just vote against themselves because they think they'll be rich and they don't want to pay higher taxes if they were to become rich, which is probably not going to happen. Right. So then there's another behavioral thing that's even holding us back societally here in the US. So survivorship bias makes us copy the few visible success stories and ignore the much more numerous failures that we never see, that don't get reported, or those people never speak up because they're embarrassed about it. And so we see people that have won, day trading or doing crazy things, gambling, or becoming famous in Hollywood when there's, 20 times more failed actors that wasted not getting a better degree and what so in a career that they would have been happy with chasing their dreams. Not to say you shouldn't chase your dreams, by all means. But again, we should understand the real odds of things. But we don't hear those stories most of the time, right? You don't hear the stories of the failures. All the time I hear somebody, oh, my friend made so much money on crypto and this and that. And, I never, lots of my friends are doing this, but they don't hear the bad things of all the friends that lost a lot of money, or the dude or girl or whoever made a bunch on crypto, but 2 years ago they lost all their money on this other speculative thing, and a couple years from now they may crap out when something bad happens, when they make another high risk bet, and they're not going to tell you about it, right? All you will have heard of are the good things that happened, and that is that survivorship bias. And then of course, most of you have heard this if you've looked into investing. I deal with this all the time, and it's okay. Again, all these things are not criticisms of you. I'm talking about it like me and you, right? Because part of this webinar is for us to understand these things, and if we understand these things in ourselves, even though you'd be mad at me for pointing out that there's something wrong with me, I'm not criticizing you. I'm just helping you to understand. And if you can have kind of that humbleness to accept some of these things and see them in yourself, you will be much more successful, right? But I deal with fear and greed a lot because the more successful you are, you don't want to lose it, right? And there's all the time on the news or people that want to sell things, that are fear mongering to get you to buy what they're selling. And then on the greed side of things, it's almost never enough, when we're growing things to hit the next level or to make this much more money, or somebody's making more than me, or there's this opportunity. And so we've got to temper these, because a lot of times both of those things will make us make very suboptimal decisions. And we really need to analyze what we need our money for, what's the best way we can get it to grow with what we're comfortable wise, risk wise. And it's almost never going to be at the lowest safety or the highest risk, because it's easy after something's already succeeded and it made the highest rate of return to realize that the risk was like 3 or 4 times the next best thing, even though it made double. So it's a very suboptimal decision when we look at risk versus reward. And then you may not even be tolerable to being able to take that risk, even if in the end the reward paid off, because you may have had to go through such a low to get to the high, you wouldn't have gotten there. And so we have to analyze these things and make smart decisions for ourselves, not just follow along with jumping on the fear or the greed bandwagon. So moving on. So I helped you explore some of these biases and heuristics. By all means, they are not comprehensive. There's lots of great books out there like Thinking Fast or Slow, and other very good explanations of why our minds are how they are. And it's not necessarily a fault per se. There were reasons why we again evolved this way. And now that we have this knowledge and that we can, make ourselves better, we can realize these things and stop ourselves from doing them or use them in ways that are productive instead of destructive. So, you know, I like this, kind of quote, wealth building um, is counterintuitive. It rewards patience, humility, and detachment. And that sounds weird, right? Because we think about making money in the stock market and investing in things and starting businesses. It's like get out there, take risks, put money. It takes money to make money. And uh, I think a lot of the pop culture is the opposite of that. And some of that is right. Like we do need to take risks, but we need to take calculated risks. We need to take things that make you the house if you're thinking about gambling instead of you as the gambler and the house has the odds in its favor. We need to put the odds in your favor and then only take the risks that are appropriate, that are efficient for you. And you need to do that over and over and over again and stop yourself from making the small mistakes that we talk about. And so that's why our patience and humility and detachment come from is that you've got to apply this over and over and over again because believe it or not, when we look at the probability and statistics, the main way that people become wealthy and stay wealthy is from get rich slow. It's not get rich fast. It's get rich slow. Most people that get rich fast, they get poor again fast. It won't stay. Okay. There's a few people that got lucky and then switched to this. But again, it doesn't happen very often because they'll end up losing it. So, true wealth, grows slowly. People who seem to be doing nothing with money, who quietly save, invest, stay consistent, are often the ones that build lasting wealth, turn it into generational wealth, give their kids or whoever they want to give to um, the next generation a big boost up to not have to start from scratch like a lot of us. And so, your job, our job, is to stop chasing excitement and start cultivating discipline because boring money habits are the ones that actually work. Get rich slow. Okay. So, what are we going to do? Right. So, first of all, this is one of the most important things. Okay. And that is what Abraham Lincoln said, or what was attributed to him, is that you need to sharpen the axe. So if he said, hey, if somebody gave me, an hour to chop down a tree, I would spend the first, 45 minutes sharpening the axe and making sure my equipment is good so that I could go out there and get it done right and quickly when I actually had to use that tool. So for you, your most valuable asset and what we're talking about building wealth is your future income for most people. I mean, if you're way into the end of your career, it's not necessarily the case. But most people, if we're starting from scratch, it means that you're generally on the younger side. And so your future earning potential is your biggest asset. And so just like that example it gives, a 30-year-old earning $50,000 a year will earn $1.5 million by retirement, even if they didn't get any raises or bonuses or anything like that, windfalls, etc. And so if you just increase your income by just 20%, you've added an additional, I mean, that's over the entire 30 years, you've added an additional $300,000 to your lifetime earnings. So that's a lot of money, right? And so we can't forget that um, you getting a good job, you keeping up your skills, you thinking about what's not going to get you replaced by a machine or AI or what so is very important first step, right? Or re-step if we messed up once. And so you got to focus relentlessly on keeping that up. Find a way to increase your value in the marketplace. Plan your career like a long-term investment, and it is probably one of the biggest ones you'll make. The next one you've probably heard before, okay, but it's important, and that's living within your means. And so once you've got income, the next step is the discipline to keep some of it for yourself. You have to live within your means, and if you spend everything you make and you pay taxes to where there's not much left in the end, then you're working all that time and keeping nothing for yourself because the savings part of what you have is what you get to keep for yourself. Okay. And so I really like the 50-30-20 rule. That's what this graph is kind of showing in a big pie graph kind of way. Is that you spend you spend 50% or less on the things that you need or that you have to have. Okay. So like your mortgage and your car and your student loans, the things you have to pay, right? Your basic food and shelter and utilities, you need to make that fit within 50% of what you make. Okay, taxes go in that category as well too. Okay, 30% hopefully on the things you want. Obviously, some of that 30% could go into the 50%, but it's not ideal because if you live your whole life, pumping 80% into your needs, like it's kind of a miserable life. It's almost indentured servitude, right? You're just working for the man and you got nothing to enjoy life for, right? So 30% on wants is good. So like being able to eat out, being able to get clothes more than utility, being able to go on vacation, being able to get gifts for your friends and family and stuff like that, right? So keeping that to 30% or inflating it to that if you've built your have to have stuff too high. You bought too big of a house or too much of a car, and you made that needs percentage too high, you're hurting yourself, right? You're living beyond your means. Even if you could get it within the 80 and still save 20. It's one of those things that you won't keep up probably for the rest of your life because it's too much. Then 20% or more, if you can do it, to savings, okay, or investing. This is simple, but it's really powerful. If you can make everything fit and work inside that framework, you've already beaten most Americans. And Americans, we've done better at accumulating wealth than anyone else. And so the point isn't to deprive yourself. It's designing a quality life that's going to get better over time because you're not a robot. You can't work forever. And so you've got a limited time you can work. And so you need to enjoy the time that you are working as well as saving up money so that at some point you're not working for money. When that money gets big enough, you're going to be able to earn enough off of it so that the money can work for you and what it kicks off can support you. Right. And so 20% is about the minimum you're going to need to do that over a 30 or 40-year period. Okay. Build your safety net. So again, a lot of people in my industry will put this before the last one, but I think they're wrong because fundamentally you need to have a framework of how you're building your life, how expensive of a house you're going to get, how expensive of a car are you going to get, how much are your utilities, where are you moving, what are the property taxes? Oh, you want to send your kids to private school and you're going to live in an area that has high property taxes? It may not fit in that 50. So I think you need to get that first so that you got the money to hit this. But this is very important, getting an emergency fund and building the habit of doing it. And so generally, most people should have somewhere between 3 to 6 months. Sometimes in planning, we expand that to 2 to 12. Two people have very guaranteed incomes and don't necessarily and live well within their means may not need as much of an emergency fund. Someone that has a little bit more expensive, isn't as guaranteed, maybe even self-employed, they may need the whole 12 months. But for most people, 3 to 6 months is good. We see most people at like 3 to 4. And this is just having, in your, checking and savings above what you're flowing through every month. Okay. Because that's just cash flow. I wouldn't count that as savings. For example, let's say the things you had to pay for your house and your car come out of your checking, and that's 4,000 or maybe not that much, maybe $3,000 a month for both of those. Then you got 6,000 in your checking and savings. You don't have 6,000 in savings. You have 3,000, right? Because that money is going to go away, and it's always going to go away every month. So you really don't have that in savings. So when we're talking about this savings, is above what you're spending on that monthly basis. That's just in there to lube the gears to make your life work. Okay. So, start with $1,000, get to $1,000, then build to 1 month, then get to 3, then get to where you need to be for what you and your partner or your advisor or coach has for where you want to. And then you're going to be able to cover that emergency expense when, not if, when something happens to you. You're not going to put it on some high interest card or try to figure out how to take some loan from your 401k or go into debt or borrow money from somebody else or have something really bad happen that you just can't pay for And either you don't get it or you have bill collectors and stuff after you and it ruins your credit, you'll be able to cover that. So that is a core cornerstone. And if you practice that, then you really should never really run up any high interest debt. And that's going to save you a lot of money over your lifetime. And then you got to protect what you built. Okay. And so, two things you got to do and protect the most. Number one is first and foremost, especially in the United States, we don't do a good job of taking care of people health insurance wise and health cost wise. And so unless you're over 65 already, or you're on Medicaid and you've gone through all the paperwork and stuff, I know people that don't have that much that would qualify for it still don't have that coverage. You need to get your health insurance covered, right? Because you can get in a hole real fast. It's real hard to get out of. And things that you think regular stuff's expensive, look at what the healthcare costs really are. And a lot of people don't even pay attention to that because they've got their health insurance through work and it just pays all the bills and they have these little overages that they pay. But if you had to pay one of those things without their negotiated rate, something simple that you might have paid $200 out of pocket for might be $20,000. And they may negotiate with you, but that's going to mess up your credit, et cetera. It's going to cost you in other ways. You may not be able to get a house or you're going to pay a lot more interest over your life. So you just don't want to get that. Plus, there's a lot of stress as well too. How am I going to pay for this? And then they're calling you and bothering you, so you got to cover that. And it's way more complicated than it should be. Thankfully, you can use some of the new things out there like AI to help you navigate the different health insurance options. There are agents and stuff out there, but unfortunately, a lot of them are very commission based and they don't necessarily have to be a fiduciary and tell you what's right for you. So it's very much a buyer's beware market. But you need to do it well, and deciding whether you're going to do a high deductible plan or one that'll pay for a lot of expenses that's a higher premium and which one's better for you and your family and covers the doctors and the drugs that you need is an important financial decision. You should not just go with the default most of the time. You need to do your research on this and get the right thing because it can mean the difference for a lot of money. Then the next thing would be for most people, that aren't closer to retirement is disability insurance, right? Because most people are more likely to become, earlier in life, to become disabled than to die. And of course, what we say your biggest asset it was your ability to work and earn an income. If you can't work and earn an income, that is a big risk, so you need to ensure that. And so, Social Security, disability, after you paid in long enough has some protection. It's not the greatest, but there's a social safety net there after like 10 years of working. But a lot of good employer plans have group disability. And so the one you want is long-term disability. You can do short-term, but the one that's a risk to you is the long-term disability. And so generally try to get on that group, insure your income, up to 60 to 80%. The higher, the better generally, unless it's prohibitively expensive. And that's kind of the next thing you need to protect. If you have people that depend on you and you're the main or very important breadwinner, then that's where life insurance comes in. For most people, that's going to be term insurance, not buying whole life or expensive investment insurances. You want to buy the best deal insurance to cover the risk. Then we need to get some of the other pieces of the puzzle in there to where if you died, what you had in savings and retirement and your house equity is enough for your family and you don't need insurance, or at least life insurance or disability insurance forever. We'll always need the health insurance, and hopefully the politicians don't mess up our Medicare. Wouldn't put it past them, but that's a big voting block. So even those self-interested greedy bags probably will hopefully keep their hands off of that longer rather than shorter. Then once we've taken care of that, so I kind of analogize this to climbing up a ladder. So that insurance is to make sure you don't get jerked back down, right? So as we accelerate climbing up the ladder, then we need to save for growth. Okay, we want to get that compounding power, that interest, working for us. So number one, if you work somewhere that has a 401k or an employer retirement plan, most of them do now, you should absolutely be participating in that. I don't care if they give you a match or not, participate in it. You need to save in it. But if there is a match, that's just double down. That's free money if you don't put into there, right? So you got to put at least the minimum in there to get the match. So for a lot of people, that's 5 or 6% to get 4. Okay. So just as a safety thing, tell people, even if you're tight, but you can afford it, you need to get the 6% into there. Just do it. Do 6%. At least start at 6%, even if it's hard. Then you've got the ability to do Roth IRAs. Okay. So that's a savings account that you can have different types of investments in it. When you're young, generally, you should probably have something that's a little bit more aggressive that'll grow more, even though it fluctuates, because we're not going to use it for a long time, right? And then you put it in after tax. And most people earlier in their careers right now are hardly paying any federal taxes. Obviously, you're paying your Social Security and Medicare, et cetera. But hopefully, we're going to get something for that. That's not like taxes that we're just losing. So we put it in after tax. And then no matter how much it grows to in the future, as long as we follow the rules, and the 2 most important rules are you got to have it open for more than 5 years and you got to be over 59 and a half. You follow those 2 rules, no matter how much it makes, you get to keep it tax free. Okay, that's really cool. So that's kind of the number 2 thing. And, the limits change every year and depending on how old you are. So, you can Google it real fast or talk to your advisor. Right now, we got the limits up there so that you can see them. Increase your contributions annually. So, and especially when you get raises as well too. So I tell people, in your retirement accounts, until you max them out, you should try to get up to 15%. And if you can't do that because that 50-30-20 is just not working with everything you got to do, hopefully at some point you get your emergency reserve up to where you need to. You get that debt off your back. You're getting some raises. And you kind of delay a little bit buying that bigger house or more expensive car so that you can get your savings up to where you need it to be. Do this every year, at least go up 1 to 2%. So on some 401ks, you can just set it to happen automatically. Check that box to let it happen automatically. Most people won't even notice that it increased. And then after a few years, you look and you're just like, dang, how'd I get saving so much? But now I've got this extra money. That's great. If you get a raise and you were behind, like say you get a 10% raise, give 5% into yourself, give 5% into, more savings into the 401k, right? That's a good way to jump to get up to where you should be savings wise. And then once you, really get that under control and get up to where you should be, then invest in non-retirement investment accounts as well. Okay. And so we try to encourage this behavior with all of our clients as well too, because then we can earn more than just what a savings account, hopefully these aren't guaranteed, but more than what a savings account would pay, but you could use it for other things that are earlier, like doing that patio or paying for, helping to pay for a kid's college. And there could be more efficient ways to do that, like 529s and what so. But, following these kind of 4 steps kind of makes it easy. And everybody might have a little bit different path or, we could give you different advice for you individually. We have affordable plans where you can have a coach with us. We're trying to pilot out having a free version where you're able to use our tools and calculators. And eventually we're trying to roll out a little bit of investment advice AI wise, but it's just kind of tougher in our industry because of the accountability of advice when you're an investment advisor. And we just can't have some automated thing telling people what to do if every once in a while it's wrong, right? So that compounding makes a real difference. So automate it, compound it. Gives you a little example here, $200 a month, 8% per year. By age 65, grows to $700,000. If you waited just 10 years, because you said, I'll make more after I get a couple promotions, then that's only 300,000, less than half for only missing 1/4 of the time period. So saving earlier is more important than saving more. Okay, remember that. So wherever you are, however young you are, you don't have until tomorrow. Start saving now, even if it's smaller. It is more powerful. Invest in yourself and beyond. So beyond traditional savings, your best investment probably is still you. Education, your health, certifications, side ventures, can multiply your income potential. Later, you can explore real estate or business ownership if appropriate. Now, again, without real expertise, and especially on the business side of things, it can be you can have a higher failure rate and more expensive than you think. to get the acumen to have a successful business, and can be a hard knocks thing. But if you do have a successful business, it is very rewarding to build in your wealth. But just be careful with it, do it right, understand what you're doing. So yeah, so remember, most businesses fail. So don't ask your, don't risk your foundation and your dream until you've built your safety net and your foundation, and what you're risking is, above and beyond. Okay. As your situation gets more complex, don't try to do everything alone. Build a financial team. Eventually, if you are successful, you'll probably need an accountant, because unfortunately, we've made our taxes more complicated than they necessarily need to be. I don't see that changing anytime soon. So a good accountant can, once you start to get more complexity into your life and more success, can generally make their money back for you relatively easy. A financial planner like us can help you with strategy and modeling things out and best practices and good ideas and keeping up as things change, and telling you when we need a third party accountant and attorney. And so then attorneys, if you're going to start businesses or own property, and making sure that the right legal entities and in strategy from a legal perspective is set up, and that you're protected, or that you're successful, and we have the right estate type thing, so that the government or probate attorneys and what's aren't going to eat up your success, rather than it going to where you want it to, like your kids or your church or charity that you care about. Optimize and plan ahead. So then you start getting to more advanced planning. These are our bread and butter for people as they become successful, is really optimizing what they've done through years of discipline and hard work. It's thinking beyond the tax filing to tax planning and Roth conversions and tax loss harvesting and timing when you realize gains, rather than just doing things. And you absolutely can. But again, a good advisor can make you usually multiple times what you pay them. And so these are the things that are enjoyable to us, that are complex and hard, and make our life fulfilling to help people with. That is a very good win-win in this. So the get rich slow formula, right here it is. Understand yourself, right? Like we talked about, to have that humbleness and to get rid of your uh, to get rid of our ego, and admit that we have these things, and that we can overcome them if we catch them. Avoid those emotional mistakes. Earn more, spend less, save, and invest the difference. Protect what you built, and then you repeat this for decades. Sounds easy, right? It's not glamorous, but it's about as close to guaranteed to work if you stick with it. So getting rich slow isn't failure, it's a mastery of yourself, and it works. This is why it works, because it is hard, right? It's not necessarily hard, it's just hard to put it all together and to do it over and over and over again for years and years. But you can do it. You can, you know? And so if you take one thing away from today, let it be this: that you're not behind, you're just at the beginning of the next chapter of understanding how to do it. So wealth isn't luck, it's a behavior pattern. You build one smart, small, consistent step at a time. Get rich slow, stay humble, start tracking your wins. You can absolutely change your stars. And today is where you can start doing it. So if you have questions, throw them in here. We'll stay on for another minute or two. You can use these QR codes as well. We do complimentary consultations. So like I said, we have a free version. We have a simple, which is kind of like a gym membership where you work with a coach, all the way up from our E-Rebels, silver, and gold levels to more complex planning. But we let people graduate so that we can be affordable to help people along this journey, versus most financial firms that are like, if you don't have a $500,000 or $1 million, you can't be a client. Don't believe in that. It's horrible. And then if you've already got an investment account and want us to do analysis, we do this free portfolio analysis. You can use that QR code as well. Of course, I have our disclosures. So I always try to make these presentations to be as factual as I can. But I'm making a new one almost every week. And so it's a lot of stuff. We can't be perfect. So definitely look things up. Check with your advisors before you implement something. You need to talk to somebody or double check everything that we talk about in these to make sure that it's right. So we're not making any guarantees or representation or warranties on these. We're just trying to help you be better, do better, and do these fairly often and keep the content up to date. So again, don't see any questions. Do we have any questions? That's okay. If you're watching this on demand, you can still put it in the chat or in some of the comments. And generally, I get back to even the ones after the fact. If you thought about it afterwards and we're like, dang, I should have thrown that into there. And I will usually send you an email or a video response so that you still get your questions answered. So again, I hope that you are having a wonderful week. For us, it is fall right now, pushing into winter. So happy holidays to you. If you're watching this another time, let us know how we can help anytime. I wish you success wherever you are in your journey and hope that at some point we can help you along with it. So hopefully we will see you next time. Next time, we are going to talk about the Conscientious Investor's Guide to What We're Grateful For. So we're going to talk about some of the technology and financial system and economy and that make it possible for us to succeed, and what's good and what may be going sideways, but what's still okay, and how to use things and stay safe. And then before Christmas, we're going to have a Christian themed values-based investment webinar, which I think if that's something that interests you, is pretty timely, obviously, and very few companies do that well. And a lot of them that do are expensive, and we're trying to work on bringing that down and really customize things for people. So let us know how we can help anytime. Have a great rest of the week, and thanks for joining in again, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.